Let's mellow out now with some marijuana news and the future of pot in Michigan. A new Epic MRA poll out this week showed that 53% of Michiganders would support legalizing and taxing marijuana. And compared to polls in the last few years, the number supporting it continues to grow. So will Michigan be among a list of states with the pot question on the ballot this November? You know, we've talked about this a little bit, that this could be the year for the pot legalization question in Michigan. Nolan, what's your feeling in terms of, I mean, they're collecting signatures right now and they're getting close to what they need.
They are, and I would think that poll suggests bad news for the proposal. If it's just 53% at the start, typically a proposal to change a law, you need at least 65% at the start, because remember, no spending has been done against it yet. I'm not sure that's a very strong support number to get a ballot measure passed.
You know, people who support it say, well, sometimes when people are asked the pot question on a poll, that they sometimes maybe don't tell the truth, that there's maybe more support out there than they think.
I could see it passing. I don't think that's much of the question. I was surprised by that number. I think it is actually higher. My concern is still that there's not enough regulatory scheme in place to deal with it. I mean, if we want to legalize marijuana, we need to start dealing with when can you use it, when can you not? Can you do it and drive? If not, then how do you test for that, for instance? Those are things that I think I would rather see us do up front than on the back end. It probably won't work that way if they get this on the ballot, because again, I think it would pass.
Do you think this would be a good thing for Michigan, though? I mean, you take a look at what they could tax from this, and then, you know, they put the taxes towards education, you put it towards government services, towards infrastructure repair.
Everything rests with the implementing language. It depends how the law is written once it comes to the legislature, because, you know, a ballot proposal just starts the process.
Yeah.
And so if they try to come up with a regimen that is half legal, half illegal. In other words, they don't allow for the legal production and the legal distribution. If it's simply, okay, you can use marijuana, it will no longer be criminal, I think it doesn't do what it needs to do. I think you have to legalize the process from start to finish.
Well, you would also have to take a look at what Colorado has done in the last couple of years. And I think that they're pretty much split in Colorado, about a little bit more majority saying this has been a successful venture for them. But they are still having some policing problems and figuring out how you do test for what you're talking about.
Right.
High while driving, and those sort of
other
things.
stuff.
That's a simple solution. You don't prosecute or you don't write tickets for what somebody did. You write tickets for how they're driving. If they're driving erratically, then you write a ticket for that. I don't know that testing what's in their system is as important as how they're driving.
Well, I mean, there's a difference between reckless driving and impaired driving is the point. I mean, the law makes that distinction.
Well, if you're impaired, you're going to be driving erratically and recklessly.
Well, but even if you're not,
I mean
there's a law against being impaired.
I think that's the problem with trying to set arbitrary blood level
you just want
and what have you.
just want the drunk driving limits lowered.
I think .08 is different for different people. You prosecute. You enforce the law on how somebody's driving, not what's in their system.
Yeah, I don't think I agree with that. I mean, I think there should be legal limits for impairment, and whether it's drugs or alcohol or whatever.
Although you would acknowledge that people are impaired at different levels, correct? Some lower, some higher.
No,
you've got to judge the actual act, the actual behavior, not what somebody did before.
But I mean, sort of back to the marijuana question.
It's the same question.
There's no test for that, right?
It doesn't matter. There's a test for whether you're driving well or not.
Yeah, no, I think there's.
I mean, if you're driving dangerously,
so part of
that's what you should be prosecuted for.
Yeah, but part of the law, part of the thinking behind the law is prophylactic. It's not to deal with writing tickets. It's to prevent people from doing it in the first place. So that's why we set limits and say, if you're over this limit, don't get behind the wheel. And whether you are stopped by police or not, you are breaking the law.
And I think those kind of laws don't work very well, and you're never going to get by this legalization question unless you get over this obsession with.
I think if you look at the number of drunk driving fatalities before we lowered the limit and after, I think you would not be able to support what
So
you're
you'd have to
saying
change.
there.
Something else that is different, and I'm doing some research and taking a look at what Colorado has done as well, is that it's also a very large cash business
Yeah.
as well, because they can't do a lot of banking because of the federal regulations about marijuana use and sales, because federally, I mean, that is still an illegal substance, but because the Supreme Court is not going to be taking up that issue, and they just pushed that back down about a week ago or so. It's still a very interesting thing. Now, we're not the only ones who are flirting with this. Arizona is, Massachusetts
Yeah, I mean,
is.
you've got states now moving in the direction of legalization, and that, I think, puts more pressure on the federal government to rethink its classification of the drug. Should it be something that you can never use or never sell? Or should it be something like alcohol or other kinds of substances?
There's got to be some deference to state laws. We've got people in Michigan who are in jail today who were in complete compliance with state laws and thought what they were doing was legal, and it was under state law. And the feds have busted them and put them in jail. I mean, that's not right. You've got to reconcile the state and federal
I mean,
laws.
there are lots of things that are different between states and federal law. Here, you have a direct conflict, and that's sort of unusual. But I mean, the way it usually happens is that a number of states will move in a direction that contradicts federal law, and then the federal law gets reconsidered. I don't know that we're quite there yet. You only have a couple of states that have actually legalized marijuana, but I think that the discussion about it is happening at such a pace that the federal government would be smart to start thinking about, well, you know, what would this look like if you had 50 states, for instance, or even 35 who had legal marijuana? That conflict with the federal law would raise much bigger issues.
All right, so what do we think about the future of pot here in Michigan?
Well, I think it's going to happen. The sooner the better. I think you could put the Mexican drug cartels out of business almost overnight if all 50 states legalized the production, distribution, and use of marijuana. I mean, it makes no sense. I mean, I've always said when my kids were teenager, I would rather have them smoking marijuana than drinking alcohol.
Really?
Because
Why?
it's the level of impairment is so much. I mean, over drinking alcohol will kill you or can kill you.
Sure.
And I don't know that we've had anyone.
The public health issues with alcohol are different than they are with marijuana, but the sort of, again,
I would say it's a worse drug than marijuana, and that's legal and marijuana is.
yeah, I think behind the wheel is my concern. Behind the wheel, behind the controls
are
of
bad.
heavy
Both are
construction
bad.
equipment. Well, it's against the law to do those things with alcohol, and you can test for that. You can't do that yet for marijuana.
All right. We'll have to leave the pot question aside for now.
I don't know. I mean, one thing
what?
I'm not sure is whether they're going to get their act together with these ballot proposals. There are two
Right.
competing interests. They're trying to get the thing on the ballot.
Who will oppose? I mean, where
I don't
will
know.
the opposition money? I think that's the key question, where the opposition money comes from and how much of it. Because again, 53% is not a great starting point for a ballot measure.
It's not. That's true. I'm not sure I believe that number, but you're right.
I was just going to say, there's not 15 more % sitting somewhere in a corner.
I think there might. Eating
with a couple
Doritos.
of eating Triscuits.
Medical marijuana passed here by a fairly substantial margin.
It
There's no
did.
reason to think
Yeah.
that this won't. But
All right.